Okay, welcome everybody to Pro 213. This is week 3, which means that you have officially made it through more than half of the class. Congratulations. We are into week 3. You've made it through weeks 1 and 2, and for the most part, most of you are doing very well. There were a few more of you who didn't get the assignment done last week of the discussion board. I hope that was just a one-off situation, and I hope to see you get caught up as soon as possible. Got about 2/3 of the posts graded at this point, at the point that I'm recording this. But as soon as I complete this session and post the recorded session this evening, I'll get back to it and finish the last third of the class as far as the grading for this week. Just a quick note, housekeeping note. Next week with the holiday, the 4th of July on Tuesday, I will be out of town Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with family, and I will have access to be on the discussion board, but I won't have access in order to be able to record a session. And so what that means is I will be pre-recording the session for next week, probably Saturday at some point. And so you'll see the recorded session for week 4 get posted earlier than normal, and we will not be holding a live session next Monday evening. It's the night before the 4th of July. I'm sure many of you will have family or different festivities going on that night. So anyway, that's just a heads up for next week. Won't change anything else about the week other than no live session. The pre-recorded session will be available earlier than normal, which gives you more time to review it, I guess, earlier on in the week and accomplish what you need to for the week. But as far as requirements for the week, no different. I know it's a little bit of a strain with a holiday on Tuesday, but do whatever you need to do. Schedule, however you need to schedule in order to make sure that you've got your first post done by Wednesday next week, which is the normal, format for that. All right, so this week is another week on personal financial management. We talked a lot about budgeting week 1. We talked last week about different financial concepts, a little bit higher level, living within your means, how we do that, what goes into that, some tips and tricks for doing that. This week, more, we're going to expand on some different money management issues. But just in review, as far as last week was concerned, you'll remember that we called last week's session lifestyle. And, you might think that might bring to mind, something lifestyles of the rich and famous, right? Well, lifestyle just is a decision that we all make on how we're going to live. And yes, that decision is influenced by how much we make, okay, so how much income we have, but it's not entirely controlled by how much we make or how much income we have. A lot that goes into our lifestyles is a choice, right? How much we want to live below our means or how much we want to live above our means. Now that might sound strange, but a lot of people make the conscious choice to live well below their means, and other people make a conscious choice to live well above their means, right? They outspend what they make each and every month, like our government does. We talked a little bit about that on the board last week, that our government spends about a third more than they make. If you or I as individuals spent a third more than what we make, that would end fairly quickly, right? We'd run out of money, we'd run out of credit, we'd run out of opportunities to be able to do that in short order. Having said that, that's our example, right? Countries spinning out of control and spending way more than what we bring in as revenue. And all of us probably have neighbors and friends and family, and maybe we've been in this situation where we've spent more than what we make for a time, and that usually catches up to you at some point. So lifestyle is a decision, and a decision to live within our means is one that we have available to us, right? No matter how little we make or how much we make, we can always outspend how much we make, and we can always live within our means, even if it is really, really tight. So not as much about how much we make, but it's what we do or how we use the means that we have. And one of the ways that we can kind of get on top of that is we can track and control spending. We talked about budgeting, we talked about apps and tools, a lot of that in week 1, but of course that plays into making sure that we live within our means. Budgeting is a great tool for making sure that we're going to be able to accomplish that. Talked about how there's other tools like the envelope system that I think is awesome, and I've seen a lot of people get great results from using the envelope system or a cash only system, for even if it's just for a time to get things under control, to get a budget in order, and then to get used to spending habits. Once those spending habits get put into place, then it's easier to maintain. It's like getting in shape, right? Sometimes it takes a little bit more of an extreme diet or exercise plan to get in shape. Once you're in shape, it takes a little bit less rigorous plan, less intense plan, maybe, to maintain it. Okay, maintenance is easier than the change. And the same is true for our budgeting. If we're living 20 or 30 or 40% above our means at this point, each and every month, going backwards into debt, making that adjustment might take some pretty extreme measures, like going to a cash only budget, like completing, Financial Peace University or something like that through Dave Ramsey, and going through some pretty intense transition. But once you've gotten out of debt and made that change, or once you've gotten to a situation where you have a surplus instead of a deficit each month, as far as your budget is concerned, it's a lot easier to maintain that, and not nearly as intense going forward, or doesn't have to be as intense. Can be, doesn't have to be as intense going forward. So there's only two things we can really control when it comes to our finances: the amount of income, the amount of revenue that we bring in, and the amount of costs that we have, or expenses or outflows that we have. And obviously, some of those expenses and costs, some of those revenues are much harder to adjust than others. So for example, if I don't have any degree and I live in a small town, it might be almost impossible for me to get a second job or any other stream of revenue, to add to my revenue or inflows each month. Somebody else might be able to add a second or third job very easily. They might be able to get a different job, that pays better very easily, just because of various opportunities, education, things like that. So all of us are kind of in a different circumstance. Limiting costs or limiting income might be a lot harder for one person than it is for another. Having said that, we have some amount of control over both, right? It might not be a lot, and it might not be easy, or it might not be in our time frame, the time frame we want, but we all have some form of control. And all of you that are taking this class are in some way taking control of that issue of income. So by getting an education, by completing your degree, you are putting yourself more and more in control of how your income is and your ability to add income, right? So education is one of those things that was under your control. And yes, it takes a long time. And yes, it takes a lot of effort. So it's not a quick thing where you can control something very quickly, but you nevertheless have control over your ability to earn income by the fact that you can always go back and get additional education. You can get different experience. Those kinds of things tend to help income streams. And finally, we talked last week about credit scores, the importance of credit. If you've got any questions or concerns about credit or credit scores or the 3 credit bureaus, or issues with your credit report, email me, call me, whatever. Credit is one of those things that we want to make sure everybody feels comfortable with, everybody feels like they can improve where they're at, and also maintain a high score throughout their lives in order to accomplish good loans and accomplish, sometimes just even weird things like car insurance and things like that can be subject to a credit check, and you can get something better if you've got a good payment history. So the point on credit is that we want to make sure that we have a good score. We want to make sure that our credit reports are positive from all 3 bureaus. And we've talked a little bit about it, but I also posted last week on the discussion board a fairly lengthy post about credit, and would encourage you to consider reading that again if you didn't, and maybe doing some additional research on a site like Credit Karma, or on a site like annualcreditreport.com, or on a site like mint.com. There's lots of different sites that provide good information. Even the federalreserve.gov, there's different government sites and resources as far as credit is concerned, to make sure that you have a good score, improve your score, help your score, and keep a good score throughout your life. Okay, so that's a brief review of the kinds of things we've been covering, the information that we've had so far. Really, I hope that none of this becomes a situation where you're already overwhelmed by all the different things that you should have to do from a budgeting standpoint. Like anything else in life, I hope that you'll just bite off a few things, that you feel comfortable with, that you can do a little better with. So, for example, if you're not saving anything right now, there's no savings whatsoever, set up a savings account at the bank, set up an automatic contribution to it of $5 or $10 every 2 weeks, something that's not going to make you go into debt, and be consistent with that, and then try to raise it as often as you possibly can. If you're in a situation where you're just underwater, you can't get on top of your month-to-month budgeting, then make sure and use an envelopes like system where you go to a cash only system and really get in control or get in charge of your finances month to month, your inflows and outflows. If you're drowning in debt, if you've got lots and lots of debt and see no way out, then maybe credit counseling or debt management, or some kind of Dave Ramsey financial peace program that, yes, they take time, and yes, it's hard, and it takes a lot of effort, but it would be well worth it for for you to go down that path and accomplish that. So take wherever you're at, and hopefully you can find a few tips from this class, or a few things from a standpoint of your personal financial money management, and be able to make some improvement or make some progress. So that is all I wanted to cover as far as review from previous weeks. This is where I would normally engage whoever was here to make sure they don't have any questions or concerns, but as there are no participants tonight, we'll just continue on. All right, so what are we doing this week? As far as this week is concerned, we have the discussion board again. Last week we had 3 pair responses. This week we only have 2, so back to the normal format. You do, however, have to get a post in by Wednesday at midnight. Of course, your regular main post, and then 2 pair responses as normal by Saturday at midnight for full credit. Now, as far as your main post this week, the main post is to be an interview. I gave you a heads up last week on the discussion board, and also within the instructions, it told you that you would be doing an interview this week, and to consider 3 to 5 people that have had success with their own personal money management. And the point of that little exercise, to think through maybe 3 to 5 people that you know of that are fairly successful with their money, is to then limit it down to one person, or narrow it down to one person that you'd like to interview, and make sure and complete an interview by Wednesday at midnight to give feedback on the discussion board from that interview. Now, what does this interview entail? How long does it have to be? What kinds of questions can you ask? I've posted on the discussion board some examples, or actually I posted right here, not on the discussion board, but I posted right here on the session slide that we're looking at, some different question examples. Okay, so if you're having a hard time coming up with different questions that you might ask, the bottom line is you want them to explain, right? Don't do yes or no questions when it comes to an interview. We want them to explain, with questions that they will need to explain, different things that might be helpful. So for example, one of the things that you could ask is, are you financially successful, or do you consider yourself financially successful? And they might give you an answer of yes or no. That is not really that helpful, right? If you already consider them financially successful, just assume that they consider themselves that way as well, and move on from questions that just don't get explanations. What you want are the types of questions that would have them explain the kinds of things that they feel like have made them successful financially. What kinds of tips and tricks do they feel like are important to their financial success? What kinds of things or mistakes have they made over their lifetime that they wish they would have known better, before they made those mistakes, if they're willing to share? What kinds of things would they advise somebody else who's trying to figure out their finances and get their financial house in order? What are some best practices or different things that they could accomplish to have success? And so there's just all these different kinds of questions where you can probe and have them explain the types of things that they feel like make them successful financially, and also give you some advice as far as things that they would have advised themselves had they known, now that they've got enough, more life experience and financial experience, what kinds of things would they advise you to do or do differently? And so it's just an opportunity for you to pick up some tips from somebody that you trust, that hopefully that's willing to share and open up on different things that would be helpful financially when it comes to managing money, and in turn be able to put that information onto the discussion board so that we can all benefit from each other's interviews, right? So what we're basically saying is, with 35 people in the class, all of us doing an interview and getting some tips and information and advice, there should be a significant amount of good information that comes from these interviews, and hopefully different information, right? Unique information from the different people that we interview, that we can share with each other and learn from each other and benefit from each other with that information. Okay. All right. So if you have any questions or concerns about the interview this week, let me know. Zip me a quick email if you've got any concerns or questions, or text me, and I'd be happy to help. But that is an interview that's due. The feedback on that interview is due for this coming Wednesday. So strongly encourage you to get an early start on that, just in case the folks that you want to interview might not be available, or it might be harder to schedule them for some reason. So I hope you get an early start to that, so you make sure you can accomplish it. All right, so we've got a couple articles this week. There's not a lot of reading content. I think the folks who designed the course and put in the reading content didn't want to give you too much reading content, because they really wanted you to focus in on this interview and get content, and accomplish some content from the interview, as opposed to, your readings this week. And so try to get as much advice and as many tips and as much information as you possibly can from the interview this week, and have that be, the bulk of your learning, as well as, other people's main posts, from their interviews this week. I think that'll be a lot of the content, or a lot of the tips and tricks this week that you learn about personal financial management will come from this interview and come from the discussion board. But there are a couple articles, and then I also had a couple other places that I had researched that I thought I would share as well for tonight, some different resources for money management. But as far as the articles, just a couple quick things from those articles, and then we'll move on to some other content. One of them was from Money Management International, and basically it just talks about debt management and how important it is to basically understand the terms of your debt. And this sounds kind of strange, but it's amazing how many people I will ask, what's your rate on your mortgage? Because these are things I need to know for financial planning, because I'm putting together a balance sheet, personal financial statement, and analyzing anything I can do for them to try to help them financially. And it's amazing how often I'll ask them, what's your rate on your mortgage? What are the terms on your mortgage? And they won't even know. Maybe they've been paying on it for 2 or 3 years, and they've already forgotten whether or not it's a 30-year mortgage or a 20-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage. They've already forgotten what rate it is, what rate they got. These are really important things to address, to be able to see whether or not it's a variable rate or a fixed rate. Back in 2009, a lot of people got surprised by their variable interest rate loans. Some people didn't even realize they had variable interest rate loans, or ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages, at that point. So just something to make sure that you're on top of, make sure you understand all the terms, the fine print associated with your home mortgage and the terms on it. The difference between a 15-year and a 30-year, or an adjustable rate mortgage, or a 7-in-1 ARM or 10-in-1 ARM. These are different loan products that have significant differences as far as one loan to the next. You might be just paying interest and only interest on your loan and not even know it. Or you might be paying, a lot more in interest than you had thought you were. Or maybe your interest rate has the ability to go up each year. So just worth, it's a good reminder, this article on Money Management International, to make sure and understand the terms of your different loans. So home loans, obviously we've alluded to different things that you need to be aware of for that, and that's pretty straightforward. That's your biggest debt item, most likely, and so it should be something that warrants your attention. And periodically you should shop and check and make sure that you've got the best rate available, because rates do change, obviously. As far as credit cards are concerned, terms on credit cards can be very similar between credit card companies, but they also can be very, very different. So just as an example, you might have a credit card that has a 22% rate on it, and the next person might have a credit card that has a 7.9% One credit card might have cash back. One credit card might not have any cash back but have a lower interest rate. So there's all kinds of different benefits or perks associated with most credit cards now. But a lot of those credit cards that have those benefits and perks maybe have higher interest rates. So if you're going to carry a balance, maybe those benefit cards aren't the ones that you want to have. And it's just important to understand between your different cards that you have, what are the rates, what are the terms, what are your different benefits that you get, and make sure that you're utilizing, if you are utilizing a card, the one that really best fits your situation. If it's flight benefits that you need, cash back, gift cards, whatever it might be, but you're getting some kind of benefit that you can utilize if you're going to use a credit card, or if you're going to have balances that you have the lowest interest rate possible. It's amazing how many people will have just one credit card or two credit cards. They don't know the rates on them. They don't know the terms. They don't know the benefits. They use one because it's easy to use and they've used it for a long time. But credit cards have changed dramatically over the past 10 or 20 years. A lot of them have much better cashback programs. A lot of the new cards usually pay 1.5% back on all purchases. So a lot of people are still using cards that just give them 1%. A lot of cards, older cards, that were like hotel cards or airfare, like a Marriott card or a Delta Airlines card. A lot of those cards aren't on average giving flight benefits or hotel benefits at the same rate that some of these new cards would do that aren't affiliated with, one particular hotel group or one particular airline. And so anyway, just worth checking the terms, making sure that we understand what we have, making sure that if we're going to carry a balance, that we understand what that balance interest rate is, because it could be very, very high. And if needed, to transfer away from a balance, to transfer away from something so that we get a lower interest rate somewhere else. Obviously, ideally, we wouldn't ever carry balances on credit cards, but if we have to, or if we are, or if we're paying them down right now, then make sure that we've got the lowest interest rate possible. As far as car loans are concerned, car loan rates change pretty dramatically. Usually you've got a loan that's under 6 or 7 years. So there's not a lot of opportunities to refinance, car loans within the term that they're in. And most of those loans, have most of their interest front loaded. So if you were 3 years into a 6-year loan and then went back to the dealership or went back to a bank and tried to get another loan, they'd gladly give you another loan, but it might not save you much money, because even if you can lower the interest rate, you've already paid most of the interest up front. That makes sense. And since it's such a small amortization, what that amortization is time period for the loan, since it's such a small time period relative to like a 30-year mortgage, there's not as much cost savings in refinancing a car loan. However, if you got a car loan on bad credit and have like an 8 or 9 or 12% interest on your car loan, it's well worth your time and effort to try to improve your credit and then go back and get a 2 or 3 or 4% loan like the going rate is right now for auto loans. Okay. All right, some of the things, this particular article only talked about those 3 particular debt categories: home, credit card, and car or automobile loans. I would add a few more considerations, and I wish the article would have covered them. Student loans are something that a lot of people feel like, well, they're government subsidized, or I got them through the school, they helped me get them, so it must be the best loan out there. And sometimes it's absolutely not. There are different subsidized loans. They're, through the government, that are subsidized that you don't pay on until you're done, which probably most of you are familiar with. But some of those accrue interest, right? So we still need to make sure that the interest rate is as good as we possibly can get. Many banks don't participate with student loans anymore. And so you have to, find various programs, maybe just do some research online to try to find and make sure that you've got the lowest interest rate possible on your student loans. If it's a big debt and it's a debt you're going to have for a while, you should pay just as much attention to that debt and the interest rate on it and the terms as you do on car and home loans, right? Because of the size. So be careful on student loans. Don't just assume that you've got the best deal. Definitely check around and price things around if possible, and do some research on it so that, if possible, you can save a few bucks on that. And I would say, for the amount of work that you and I, all of us, put in to earn, $20, $30, $50, okay, or even a few $100s, what it takes to work 8 hours in a day and make what we make in a day. Sometimes with a simple change on a car loan or a student loan or a home loan, we save more than a couple days work, just that by making that change or swapping or improving, our terms as far as our loans are concerned. And student loans are no different, especially with the balances that we have. It makes sense to check, double check, triple check, periodically check again the terms that we have and the rate that we're at. All right, so another set of loans that I wanted to just refer to or mention are payday loans, or so payday loans, title loans, on cars, and then pawn loans, on different things that you take to a pawn shop and they give you a loan on it. The terms on all three of these that I just mentioned are usually much worse than credit card terms, car loan terms, or home loan terms, or even student loan terms. So the word of caution on these is that if you have used them in the past, I would try to close them out as soon as I possibly could, and I would try to not ever use them again. That I've never seen title loan terms or pawn loan terms or payday terms that were good for the person who's borrowing the money. Right? They're good for the institution that's lending you that money. They are not good for you. And so if you absolutely have to use them, fine. Try to get them out as fast as you possibly can. Definitely don't get into the habit of using these institutions regularly, if at all possible, because there's, hopefully you get to a point where there's no reason to have to go back to these types of institutions if you've used them in the past. Historically, these would be like your shark lenders, that, yeah, they're willing to give you some money, but the terms are horrible, and there's a lot of significant consequences if you don't, if you're not able to pay them back. Okay. If you find yourself in a situation where you have one of these types of loans, a payday, title, or pawn loan, feel free to email me or call me or text me about the situation, and maybe there's some way that we can creatively roadmap a plan for you to get out sooner, or to just get out completely, to pay it off and do something different. Maybe use a bank, or other kind of asset that you have to get access to some money so that we can get rid of those types of lenders. Okay. All right, another one of the readings for this week was a marketplace article. Basically, it had some tips for manners, so money etiquette. This was kind of an interesting article. I just picked up a couple tips from it, that you should never ask someone how much they make or how much something costs. So if somebody pulls into your driveway with a brand new car and you say, hey, how much did that cost you? Some people don't mind answering that question, but some people would feel like that's private information. And so it's not good etiquette to ask people how much something costs. If you are going to ask them, maybe you say something like, if you don't mind if I ask, if you'd be willing to share, make sure and put that in front. How much did you pay for that, or where could I, find something like that? And then you do your own research to find out maybe what the pricing is instead of having them tell you. And then as far as how much someone makes, that's like asking someone their age. Just not considerate, especially if you're around other people. It doesn't make any sense to ask somebody how much they make. There are people, I'm sure, out there who are anxious to tell people how much they make. But for most of us, that's a personal thing, and it would be very inconsiderate and really out of bounds, to ask, especially in front of other people, how much do you make? Okay. One of the things that happens many times in a workplace is that we sign an affidavit basically saying that we won't share bonus structure or payment with anyone, even our colleagues. Okay. And especially people that we work with. You can imagine how sharing bonuses, sharing how much people make might create problems within teams, within coworkers, if they're familiar with what each other are making. Okay, so that's one of those things that a lot of companies forbid, you to talk about how much you make with other people, because they try to, lower the amount of drama, that happens. And how much people make becomes drama within a workplace, and bonuses as well. Another thing that this article points out is that your kids should understand that it's never okay to ask relatives or other individuals that they know for money. And this seems like something that maybe some of you are like, yeah, of course, they wouldn't ask for money. That's crazy. But it can create a lot of awkwardness between family members if your kids are the ones going around asking people for a loan or for money. Okay. Uh, there are circumstances that might happen, but in most cases, not appropriate, not something you want to bring into a family dynamic, of relationships between people. Get money in the way, and sometimes you can really foul up, a good thing. So, all right, so that's that article. Just a couple quick tips, and then I put there's an article by credit.org that the school put on, and I don't really like this website. This website's really trying to get you to do credit counseling. It's really trying to get you to enroll in some help when it comes to debt counseling and credit counseling. So please don't sign up for anything on this site. Obviously, after the class is over, if you felt like it was a good resource, great. But I don't gain anything. It's not meant to be some kind of solicitation or advertisement for this particular site. What it is a site that does provide some basic information on credit counseling. It does provide basic information on debt and different ways to try to resolve debt issues. And so what I use this article as, or this website, just go around on the site a little bit. There's some good resources, some good information. But basically, this is one option among others. This is a credit counseling site. These are folks who make a living. They charge in order to provide advice about getting out of debt. And there are folks that do this credit counseling and get a plan together for you to reduce your debt. And that might be a solution at some point if you feel like you're underwater and can't get out and have tried and it just doesn't work. Similar to getting someone, hiring someone, maybe a doctor to help you lose weight, right? Or maybe a physical trainer to help you get on an exercise plan. So there's nothing wrong with doing credit counseling. It's just one of those things that maybe should be a last resort method as opposed to the first thing that you turn to, because it does cost money. And then there's debt management. So there's credit counseling. Those are counselors that help you to put a plan together. Debt management folks usually aren't as focused on a plan as they are on debt consolidation of some kind. So maybe taking a loan off your home, consolidating all your debt, and in that way maybe lowering the interest that you're paying on those debts. The challenge and what people got caught up in back in 2004, 2005, 2006, when real estate was really going up, and probably will get caught up in this again now that real estate values are going up now, is that they would take money out of their house to pay down debt, then they'd run back up their debt, and then they'd take money out of their house to pay down their debt. And basically it's a vicious cycle in a situation where they never pay down their house, and they get in a situation where they're always spending more than what they should because they can. Okay. So it's a cycle that we should try to avoid, obviously, and that budgeting and good money management would always avoid. A rule of thumb on taking second mortgages or lines of credit on our house is that those second mortgages and lines of credit should only ever be used if they have to be used for improvements on the house that actually improve the value of the house. They should never be used to pay down consumer debt or other credit card debt, if possible, because those things are a black hole, right? That didn't do our home value any good, and so in essence we went backwards as far as our net equity, or the equity that we have in our home. Okay. All right, so we've got debt management, we've got credit counseling, and then we've got, of course, do it yourself. And do it yourself would be like going out and buying some Dave Ramsey material, a Financial Peace University course, something like that. And there are a lot. Ramsey's just the most prominent when it comes to debt management. But Susie Orman and others, have radio and TV shows, and they have a lot of literature. If you go into your local Barnes and Noble, or if you go on Amazon, there are lots and lots of books on getting out of debt, staying out of debt, or living debt free, or budgeting, all these kinds of things, that you could absolutely do it yourself. Sometimes we need accountability coaches, somebody to keep us accountable to what the progress we're making, because we're not great at, disciplining and keeping ourselves accountable. And if that's the case, find a family member or friend that can do that for you. If you can't find somebody like that, then maybe you might have to resort to, some kind of debt management or credit counseling plan to help keep you accountable to staying on track and getting out of debt. Okay. So one of the articles that I found this week and I think is really helpful is on Bankrate, on bankrate.com. Bankrate.com is basically a website. It's a free site with a bunch of different information. The only reason it's free is because banks are highly motivated to advertise on this site. It's got a lot of different calculators, for mortgages and things like that and debt. Shows you different rates for money markets and online savings accounts, the highest rates out there. And of course, the banks and financial institutions behind these different advertisements obviously are the ones paying for this site to exist. Having said that, this site has a lot of good information, a lot of good objective information that's not necessarily a pitch. So one of the things that this site has, Bankrate, is a course. They call it Money Management 101. And basically, it's not a course. It's like 9 or 10 slides with some information about different ways to make sure that you're doing a good job when it comes to money management. And I thought there were some pretty good things to think about. So the first one, and I think is very important, we talked about this in terms of budgeting, is to make sure and set money goals. Why do we care about money goals? Because if we don't set money goals, the drudgery of budgeting, tracking our money, and not, and living underneath, the level that we can live will become a drudgery to the point where we won't stay consistent with it. If we don't stay consistent with it, then it didn't work, right? So we need some motivational goals. We need some goals that help keep us focused. And when things become kind of tough as far as our budget is concerned, or as far as life in general financially, we'll be able to lean on those goals and that motivation that we have for some future reward or gain in order to accomplish the day-to-day operations of our finances. Okay, so really important to have those goals. Really important to want to put our kids through education, or want to have a comfortable retirement, or I want to have independence from work at age 55 or something like that. Those are the kind of goals. Or I want a new car. These are kind of goals that can help us to stay focused on the tasks, and sometimes the hard tasks, of staying disciplined with our budget. Of course, track our spending. We've talked about this a lot. Just making sure that you've looked at where your money's going. A lot of people, this is a very a big light bulb aha moment when they finally track the kinds of things they're spending money on and find out really where a lot of their money is going. They might find that a lot more money than they think is going to, coffee, or to, soda, or to, eating out, or to groceries, or to utilities. And there's all kinds of different things that might surprise us how much we're spending. And it gives us the opportunity to analyze, okay, is there any way that I can save some money here, or reduce this expense? Or maybe there's no way to reduce the expense, but at least I understand where my budget really is. And so I know in the future how I'm going to be able to carve out, some additional savings. Money Management 101, the third tip or trick or advice is to make sure that you automate your savings. We've talked about this quite a bit. I mentioned the author David Bach, An Automatic Millionaire. This is a great resource. If we can just make sure that we keep things automated, then we'll be in good shape. I mentioned that statistically, most people that when they retire just have their 401k. The reason they only have their 401k for retirement is because it's the only automatic thing that they ever did for saving. And because it was automatic, easy, and simple, it actually got done, where other things, that we meant to do or intended to do throughout our lifetimes financially just didn't. Okay, so automate it as much as you possibly can. Obviously, prepare a budget. We don't need to talk about that. We've talked about that quite a bit in this class and how important it is. But then we've got to be willing, once we've prepared that budget, we've got our goals, we've tracked our spending, we've automated our savings, we've got to be able to have the courage and discipline to make some behavior changes. Okay? The idea here is that it will take some behavior changes, and some of them might be uncomfortable in order to accomplish something really good for ourselves. Okay, I would say the same is true for all of you going back to school. That's a behavior change. That takes patience. That takes some effort, right? A lot of effort. But you all understand, or you wouldn't be here, that there's opportunity at the end of this that is worth the effort and energy that it took to get the degree. The same is true for your finances. If the effort and energy and sometimes frustration that it takes to accomplish, whatever it is that we need to behavior change when it comes to our finances will be well worth it obviously, in the end, when we have more financial independence and peace. It talks about borrowing wisely. One of the articles that we already talked about tonight is making sure and knowing the terms of your borrowing. This article talks about, you know, how significant it is when we borrow that we only borrow when absolutely necessary, and that the terms of our borrowing are really good. And as long as we keep those two things in track, the borrowing can be there. It just it won't hurt us as much as it potentially could. And then prioritizing our bills. So we talked a little bit about this when it comes to debt management, but the idea when it comes to debt management are there are two basic tracks or fundamental tracks or schools of thought when it comes to debt management. One is, to paying off debt and becoming debt free, is that we pay off the highest interest rate. And it doesn't matter what the balance is, we just go to the highest interest rate that we're paying on at this point, and we pay extra on that highest interest rate. We don't make any additional payments on any other debts at all. And then once that debt is paid off, that highest interest debt, then we go to the next highest interest debt, and we devote all our excess discretionary dollars to that one, okay? And we basically create what's called a roll-up or roll-down strategy when it comes to debt, snowball strategy, where once we pay off one or two debts, we really start to gain some momentum because we're making significantly higher excess payments to the remaining debt. And the idea is that we don't go into additional debt, right? That's the assumption, but that we pay off one debt at a time, focus on one at a time, and we focus on the highest interest rate first. So that's one school of thought when it comes to debt pay down. The other school of thought is that it's not always the best thing to pay off the highest interest rate. It might make sense to pay off the lowest balance first, so that we can then roll up, our strategy, our snowball strategy can work faster. And it really just depends on your debt situation, whether or not one of these schools of thought would be better than the other. And you could, take a little bit of effort, but you could actually plan it out and see for yourself, based on your interest rates, based on your balances, which one of these strategies would work best. If I'm not mistaken, Dave Ramsey is a pay off the smallest debt first. That's just his, school of thought. And it's just because most of the time that works. But I would tell you that it just depends on your specific situation whether or not one of those would work better than another. Okay, both of them work really well. It's just one of them might work a little bit better, and prioritizing your bills might be affected or impacted by one of those strategies a little bit better than the other, depending on how high interest rates might be for you and what kinds of balances you have. Okay, so couple more quick tips. We've got 10-15 minutes. Let me there's a great article. Well, there's a couple articles. So themuse.com has 50 personal financial tips, and then money.com, which is time.com, and then money is the magazine owned by Time, has 50 personal financial habits everyone should follow. If you just Google 50 money management tips, you'll get to both of these articles, and I think both of these articles are worth a quick review. Many of the things on these articles you might say, okay, I already know that, I'm doing that. But even if you can get a tip or two from each one of these, that would be well worth your time to look over them. And so just on the Muse article, I don't have, I'm not going to go through all 50, but there are a couple different things, like check your interest rate. Obviously, we talked about that. Track your net worth. I was discouraged by my negative net worth a few years ago, and so I wouldn't track it. But I found the last, 10 years or so that it's been really satisfying, at least on a quarterly basis, to update my net worth and show myself that I'm making some progress towards, paying down debt and improving my net worth. It's not because I have some number that I'm trying to get to. It's just because it helps me, again, with the day-to-day decisions, the day-to-day discipline that I need to be able to be motivated by this number that's getting better and better over time. Of course, budgeting. One of the pieces of advice on the Muse is that you should consider an all-cash diet. We've talked about that a lot. It's the envelope system. A quick tip that I had never heard before is called the Daily Money Minute. A gentleman, says that you should take 60 seconds every day. Okay, 60 seconds every day to track your financial goal progress and think about your financial transactions. So maybe just look up your online banking, check your financial transactions, and then pull up a spreadsheet maybe where you keep track of your net worth and financial goals, and just think for just 60 seconds, 1 minute, about those goals and about that information, and just give yourself a 60-second checkup basically financially every day. And the point is here, in 60 seconds you can do so much good, but it's just 1 minute, right? Then you can do whatever you want the rest of the day with your time, obviously, but just add that 1 minute a day to your finances. It talks about how to target at least 20% of your income towards your financial goals, savings and paying down debt. This is that 50, 30, 20 that we talked about, 20 towards financial priorities, and then the next one, 30% on your lifestyle spending, and then of course 50 on fixed costs that we've talked about that 50, 30, 20 Elizabeth Warren breakdown before. Good to see, similarities between these different advice boards. It says draft a financial vision board. I like this. This is where if we're lacking motivation, we can put a picture of a car or a home or beach in retirement or a vacation or something like that, where we stay focused on what those goals are of our financial vision. Boy, there's a lot of different things here. Get a money buddy, get somebody else to help keep you accountable. Help, brainstorm ideas maybe. When it talks about with your employment, that you can negotiate more than just your salary, work hours, title, maternity, paternity leave, vacation time, all kinds of different things are up for negotiation when you're in the HR process, but usually not at all once you're there, or rarely once you're already at an employment situation. So just keep those in mind. We're so focused sometimes on just income, but there are all these other things that have a material impact on our life, right? Our work life, and also on our finances. So keep in mind that those are negotiable, and there are ways to make those negotiable, in a good way, and not turn off your potential employer to you. There's a tactful way of doing that. Tip here says don't ever co-sign on a loan. I wouldn't say don't ever. I think there are exceptions to this, but be very, very careful with co-signing with your children, co-signing with other individuals that need you to co-sign. If they need you to co-sign on a loan, it's because they don't have credit themselves or they've had a problem. So just keep that in mind, and it could potentially bring all kinds of credit ruin to you by being on that. Talks about student loans, how the federal ones are much better than the private ones. We talked about that tonight a little bit, how it makes sense to keep an eye on your loans and even your student loans. We talked about how mortgage payments and knowing your mortgage loan is important. This one talks about how we should keep our mortgage payment or rent payment below 28% of our monthly income. For some of you, that probably sounds crazy. That sounds really, really hard to do. But I would strongly encourage you to do what you have to do within your income to keep your mortgage at less than a third. This one says 28%, less than 20%. So about a quarter of your revenue should be used for mortgage or rent or less. If it's any more than that, it's gonna be very difficult to make progress financially. And some of us, I've been in the situation where I felt before that I couldn't make any progress, and a big part of it's my rent, how much I'm paying. Evaluate purchases. Shop solo. Well, that's not any fun, right? It says that it's a lot easier to avoid peer pressure of purchasing and making impulse buys if we're not shopping with other people that might support that. It's an interesting tip. Start saving ASAP. Get saving. Make it automatic. Give yourself a raise when you get a raise from work. Make sure you raise your savings, retirement, savings that you're doing. Make sure and use less than 30% of your credit if you have to. So if you're using credit cards, make sure that you're keeping your balances below 30% of your overall available credit. Make sure and improve your credit and credit scores. We've talked about that before. Make saving part of your monthly budget. We've talked about that. Consider switching to a credit union or bank from an alternative financial institution. We've talked about that. When it comes to investing, avoid paying too much in fees. Make sure and rebalance your portfolio. Just some good tips, basic tips, okay, that I think are helpful. So that was an article from themuse.com, themuse.com. And if you just search for an article that they wrote on 50 personal financial tips, you'll get to that article. The one on money is great too. Got different tips. I wanted to give you a few of them. Use an employer's flex spending account, or HSA. That's something sometimes we don't think about, but health savings account and flexible spending accounts, can be really, really good. Deferred compensation, if you've got that. So different employer benefits, again, know your terms, again, know your information, and utilize those different benefits that are available. This one actually has the advice to not overspend on gifts. That's not something we've mentioned yet in this class, but could definitely spin out of control if we're buying something significant for every reception, for every event, for every housewarming, for every birthday, we can just spin completely out of control with gifts. It doesn't mean we don't get gifts, but we just need to make sure and budget for them and make sure that we're not spending too much and putting ourselves in a situation where we can't prepare for our future because of gifts. If that's the case, then we're definitely spending too much, right? This article says never buy anything on impulse. Okay, never impulse buy. It's a slippery slope. Usually we regret, whatever we buy that way. Pay your bills online whenever possible, just to make it faster and easier. Doesn't cost you as much. Let's see. I'm just skipping over ones that are repeats of ones that we've already talked about. Says keep your money in your wallet to a minimum. I think we can understand why that is. Let's see. Make sure and take advantage of automatic paycheck deductions. Deductions, for example, for 401k and retirement. Obviously take advantage, especially if they're giving you free money. There's just no reason we shouldn't be doing that. Read all contracts before signing the dotted line. That makes sense. Plan dinner menus and menus for your food in advance of a shopping trip. Plan ahead for menus. Let's see. Properly maintain your car. That's not something that we've probably mentioned yet, but just properly maintaining your car actually can put you in a situation where you don't have as much expense, and especially expense that you're not expecting, right? Unexpected expense, which is some of the hardest. That's some of the hardest expenses, or the ones that we didn't know were going to come. So if you keep your maintenance up, you should have less of that. Use your credit card only to buy things that you can pay all the way off, right? Each month. Never hold your breath for an inheritance to solve all your money problems. Make sure your house is in order, regardless of what might be coming down the road. Sometimes that never comes. So don't rely entirely on Social Security as your primary source of retirement income. Avoid the lottery. Avoid gambling. There's a reason why the lottery is known as the stupid tax. Okay, so there's just avoid cigarettes. Some of this stuff is like, yeah, of course. Avoid the temptation to keep up with the Joneses. Avoid buying new cars. Comparison shop whenever possible. Negotiate whenever you can with purchasing. And occasionally, so this is important. Towards the end of this 50 tips, 50 rules for money management. It says occasionally reward yourself by splurging. Okay, now that can spin out of control, obviously, but if you're being disciplined to a budget, make sure your budget's got some room for you to reward yourself and to splurge once in a while on something. And avoid making interest payments whenever possible. Resist the urge to tap into your emergency fund. Maintain an emergency fund. Anyway, there's just there's just some good tips. Again, this one's on time.com. If you were to research or search for 50 habits, personal finance habits everyone should follow, you'd find that article fairly easily as well. Okay, so those are the two articles I wanted to point out with the 50 tips on each one of them. That's 100 tips between the two. I'd say probably 40 of them are crossovers between those two. So you're probably only got 60 unique tips between those two 50 tip articles, but lots of different good information and a lot of different things that you could basically just piece out one or two. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't try to do them all, but take one or two for now and try to make some progress, in how you manage your money. Okay, so to wrap up tonight, a couple quotes that I found that I thought were very interesting that I think are worth considering, thinking about. The secret to financial security is not having more money, but having more control over the money we presently have. And this is a theme that I've brought up over and over and over again. Every single class, every single session, we've talked about the fact that it's not about how much money you make or how much money you have. It's about how you use what you do have. And one of the examples of this that I see over and over again in my business is that the folks who make the most money many times spend the most money. That makes sense. But they also many times spend beyond even what they make when they make a lot. So I have surgeons that I've met with that make $500,000 a year, and they spend more than $500,000 a year. So they never make any progress down on their debt. They just accumulate more things, and things that they owe money on and have to pay insurance for and have to maintain. And we get to a point at some point in their 50s where they turn around and say, okay, I have a lifestyle where I live on $500,000 a year or $600,000 a year. How am I going to save enough to get to that point in retirement? And the answer is you can't. There's no way within 10 years that we can get you enough money sitting in the bank or in investments to be able to live on that $500,000 that you're used to. You've got to change your lifestyle, or you've got to significantly pay down your debts and not live, with so much debt. But basically, they've been living, like our federal government's been living, where we live so far beyond our means as a country. At some point, got to rip that Band-Aid off. We got to make some hard changes. Some very difficult changes as a country, and a lot of individuals have to do that as well. My point is, you can have a school teacher that makes $30,000 a year. They save, they're consistent savers every month, they're frugal, they have a good budget. They can retire with more than they ever made in their life of earning money in retirement, with all their debts paid off, and they can travel and do the things that they want to do. And they have flexibility, they have control, they have independence. Something that somebody who makes a lot of money but never learns how to live within their means will never have. Okay? Control what we have. Another article, Money Like Emotions, is something that you must control. You've got to keep it under control, just like your emotions, to keep it on track. Your life can get way out of whack if your finances get off track as well, and we all know that. Maybe we've all experienced that to some degree, where life just gets a lot harder if we can't keep our money matters in order. And then finally, I just thought this was a really good, funny quote. I spent a lot of money on booze, birds. Sorry, I can't even see the quote. And fast cars. The rest I just squandered. So anyway, just a funny, lighthearted quote there. So he felt like the things, the booze, birds, and fast cars were the important things that he had spent money on, and the rest of his money was squandered to unimportant things. So, and to that point, I this is just meant to be funny, obviously, but to that point, some people, what one person prioritizes as a top priority financially for them may be very, very different from another's, right? So, we've got people in this class that have mentioned on the discussion board that, one of the most important things to them is their cars, right? Automobiles. To another person, that might mean nothing. They don't even care if they don't have a car, right? If they can get around to places, they don't need a car. One person might spend lots and lots of money on their grandchildren. Another person might not have children or grandchildren, so it's not a priority. So financially, what's important to one person is does not need to be important to another person. We need to determine what for ourselves is important, and then prioritize and make sure that we have financial goals that are consistent with the things that we value and things that we place high importance on. Okay? All right, that's all for tonight. Have a great week this week. Like I say, just remember that we're going to have a pre-recording for next week. I'll have it posted probably before the week begins for your review, but we won't be having a live session next Monday. Happy holiday next week. Happy 4th. And if you've got any questions or concerns or get stuck in the class, make sure and reach right out to me. Have a good night.